大家好，欢迎来到我的节目。非常感谢听众经常给我留言，希望你们能够加入我的喜马拉雅听友圈，这样呢，我们会在第一时间跟你分享我们的节目。今天呢，我想跟大家讲讲，以前我说过，有4样东西在西方非常受欢迎，都是从东方传到西方的。一个就是中餐，一个就是功夫，一个就是瑜伽，还有一个就是打坐。那么我以前做过一期节目，就专门讲了西方人是如何看功夫的，大家感兴趣的可以去听。那么关于打坐，其实呢，每一个主要的美国城市，像纽约、像休斯顿、像 Berkeley、像 San Francisco 都有禅修中心，禅修非常的普及。但是呢，它一般是走的这个日式的禅修 Zen Center。这个 Zen 我们知道是日语里的禅，那也是从中文的禅字翻译成的日语。那么这个日语的禅坐禅叫做 Zazen 啊，那么 Zazen 就在美国非常的流行。我今天就采访一位禅师，他走的就是这个日本禅宗啊，他是叫做法山法师。他呢，因为是日本和尚，是可以结婚的。我们知道日本的佛教在明治时期有一个改革，那么和尚是可以结婚的，所以他跟他的太太2位呢都是法师，都是禅宗的禅师，还有2个孩子，其中一个孩子儿子也在日本做和尚。曹洞宗是这个唐朝的一个禅宗，传到了日本，叫做 Soto Zen。 那么这位朋友呢，这位美国人，他修的就是 Soto Zen 曹洞宗。那么一般呢，禅是有2种，在打坐的时候，一种是要集中意念，非常的专注，还有一种就是观望自己的脑海，海洋一般的这种意识流，让它叫做 flow， 自然的流动。所以呢，也可以把它当做一种放空。我的这位朋友法山，他修的是后一种。他早年呢是一位犹太人，这位犹太人呢，他因为文学受艾伦金斯堡这些人的影响，最后呢就爱上了禅。非常有意思的是，因为他在哥伦比亚大学学英国文学的时候认识了艾伦金斯堡，而且和艾伦金斯堡一起参加了一个乐队，所以呢他跟垮掉的一代是好朋友。那么后来垮掉的一代现在还有一位还活在世的，叫做 Gary Snyder， 那住在 Berkeley， 跟他也非常熟识。所以呢，听他这些当年的历史见证者来讲讲当年的美国，也是非常的有趣儿。这个采访呢是用英文做的，所以呢我在之前就给大家做一个比较完整的总结。如果大家听不懂英文，我就再多说2句，我给大家再一些更多的内容。这个内容里头都包含什么呢？还有我们就是一起讨论了西方人怎么看佛教，还有谈到了自恨，就是中国人也有自己瞧不起自己的时候，西方人也有自恨。那么这2个问题呢，比如说从亚洲人为什么会有这种心态，和西方人会有什么心态，它原因呢是不太一样的。还有的呢，就是谈到了一些基本上非常粗浅的，或者是对佛教的一些误解。比如有人认为佛教非常的悲观，或者觉得佛教特别的势利，都喜欢有钱人，如果每个人受穷了，或者是比如说残疾了，佛教就认为是他前世做的孽。这种观念呢，他认为是不对的。那他是怎么解释的？我们可以听一听。我觉得他讲的还非常有意思。他最后说了一点，我觉得非常值得我们思考，就是说世界上有那么多的山，每一个山峰你都可以去攀登，那么攀登每一个山峰的路也都不一样。我们都想追求幸福，都想追求智慧，都想追求真善美。那每一个人都有每一个人的道行 和他的缘分。那么有的人是信了基督教，有的人可能是信了佛教，有的人信仰一切美好的事物，有的人信仰人定胜天。所以呢，你的意识决定了你的这个登山的路，当然最开始还决定了你是要登哪一座山。好的，那现在请听我跟他的英文采访。Hello, Master Hosang. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I know you are married, unlike Chinese Buddhist monks. So please tell us about you and your family.
Sure. Well, very often in the Japanese Buddhist tradition, monks are married. It was something that the Japanese government sort of imposed on the monastic orders at the end of the 19th century. So that's more or less our tradition, although there are certainly unmarried monks and nuns as well.
Yes.
But I've been married for about 30 years. My wife is also ordained as a Zen priest, and we live here at the Berkeley Zen Center, where I've been living for 36 years, and we have 2 children. My oldest child, my daughter, is about 30, and she lives in Chicago and does social policy consulting. And my son, who's 26, is a monk at a Rinzai Zen monastery in Japan right now.
Yes.
And he's been there for about 7 months.
Yes.
So they grew up here, and we live in a small community at the Berkeley Zen Center.
I'm ready to go Japanese this afternoon. See, this is my tea cup. It's a honey from Japan. And it's matcha. Yeah, so I'm all ready for it. I know you are a Zoto Zen master, although this lineage of Buddhism is from Tang Dynasty of China. But
Yes.
many people in China probably don't know. So please tell us about it.
The Soto tradition goes back to the 9th century, to the Tang Dynasty, and the founder of it was Dongshan Liangzhu, and his disciple, I think, Kaozhong. And so that became the Kaodong school, which in Japanese was transliterated as the Soto school.
Yes.
And it was one of the schools of Zen.
Yes.
And one of the ones that survived from the Tang Dynasty.
Americans know Zen through meditation. Tell us about the power of meditation.
The emphasis in our school is on meditation. That's the emphasis that our Japanese ancestor Eihei Dogen emphasized. But really, it's Buddhism in which meditation is one aspect. The power of meditation, the approach to meditation particularly in Soto, is to be able to really be in contact with yourself, to sit and to watch the nature of your mind, to watch the arising of thoughts and perceptions, to sit and watch your mind as if, say, you were sitting at the edge of a stream and watching the stream. Mm-hmm. And the thoughts flow through. So it's not there really are 2 approaches to meditation. One is focusing on concentration, mm-hmm. and really keeping your mind very intensely focused and sharp. And the other approach is actually a kind of open awareness. So that's more, of course, there's always an element of concentration, but that open awareness is really more the approach of our school, for sure. And so I think that practically and philosophically, the power of it is to widen yourself so that you have the capability of including everything that you encounter, everything that is arising in your mind.
What type of crowd do you think come to Berkeley Zen Center? Are they mainly intellectuals or people from all walks of life?
I would say there are people from all walks of life, but I think that one of the things, so if you go to China or you go to Japan or you go to Thailand, people are born into a Buddhist culture. And so Buddhism is really, in many ways, it's their everyday food. It's the air that they breathe.
Exactly.
Whereas in the United States, generally people come to Buddhism and come to meditation because they are encountering some suffering or some difficulty in their life. Now, that can be a physical difficulty, an intellectual difficulty, a spiritual difficulty. But I think that what the Buddha taught from the beginning, he basically said, I teach about suffering and the end of suffering. So for people who are encountering suffering, the end of suffering sounds like a pretty good thing.
Yes.
And if that is what is being offered by way of a spiritual practice, then people are interested in it. That's really, that's quite effectively how I came to it. It's a very small minority religion particularly compared to the varieties of Christianity. And I think Christianity is kind of the foundational religious tradition of this country. And that my background was I came from a Jewish family. Mm-hmm. And I had Jewish religious education up to a certain point, but the religious doctrine and religious practices did not really appeal to me. And so it wasn't something that I put into practice, at least after the time when I was kind of being forced to go to religious school. Yes. So I found Buddhism by myself.
Yes. You went to college at Columbia University. So
Yes.
What did you study there? What made you decide to become a Buddhist eventually?
Well, I was interested in Buddhism from high school. That I think there were two strands of interest. One was the beat poets, poets like Allen Ginsberg, Gary Snyder, Philip Whalen, who were themselves exploring Buddhism.
Yes.
And from them, I also became exposed particularly to Chinese poets and some Japanese poets. And I just really was moved by a certain way of looking at the world that I understood to be a Buddhist way of looking at the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that way of looking at the world that I see particularly in Chinese and Japanese poetry is a way that could look at very ordinary things, ordinary events, ordinary aspects of life, ordinary landscapes, whatever, and seeing that there was something really special and transcendent in that way of looking. And I was very drawn to that. It resonated with how I, as a young person, felt that I was seeing the world. And I also realized that there was some spiritual basis to this. And so that made me, I was interested in, so I was reading a little about Buddhism, and there wasn't a lot available. There wasn't a lot to read. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, when I went to college, I studied literature, English literature, and me and my friends, we continued to read what we could in some of the Oriental masterpieces, and I took some courses in that. But at a certain point, what we understood, and there was a book that came out in, I think, 1966 or 67. It was called The Three Pillars of Zen. by Philip Kapleau. And that was the first book for a general audience that had the message that Zen was something that you actually needed to do with your body, and actually you could do it. It wasn't just a philosophy. I mean, if you read D.T. Suzuki, or if you read Alan Watts, people who were writing about Zen, it was very much an intellectual issue. But here was a book that said, okay, sit down, do this and this and this, and here is the method of meditating. And when we read that, we were intrigued. And so in the summer of 1968, a number of us came out to California, and we began to go to Zen meditation at Berkeley Zen Center and at San Francisco Zen Center. And so we started then, and it turns out I was not able to sustain that. I was not able to keep it up. And so it wasn't until nearly 15 years later that I began again.
I see. Yes. But it's interesting you mentioned about the Beat generation, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and everybody. I was attracted to their literature, which made me quit school in China and came to study at Berkeley in the first place.
Wow.
So it's the same attraction.
Yes, the same attraction. That's amazing.
Yes.
I was lucky that, that I've known quite a number of them.
Wow.
I mean, I know Gary Snyder.
Yes.
I
90.
I knew Allen Ginsberg quite well, and Philip Whalen, and others of the poets.
Do you really miss that time, the 1960s, 1970s?
I don't miss it because I lived it.
Yes.
So it's in me, and there are things that are really painful now in the realities that we live in. And there were things that were painful then too. Back then, there was a war that was tearing our country apart.
Yes.
The war in Vietnam. But it was a pretty hopeful time. And I wish there were more hope for us and more hope for our children and the world that we're leaving for our children and our grandchildren is not what we thought we would be leaving for them. So
tell me a little bit about your impressions of Gary Snyder and Allen Ginsberg.
Well, Allen, I knew. First of all, I studied poetry, and so I was involved with a very creative scene of poets in New York, and it was kind of side by side with the scene that Ginsberg was in. It wasn't so separate. But what happened with Allen was in the early 70s, he started doing some music. Mm-hmm. And a very close friend of mine from high school was sort of a key person who was playing music with him. And he brought me in. So for a short time, I was sort of in Allen Ginsberg's band. Mm. And that's how I got to know him.
Yeah, you're a singer.
Singing so much, I was playing an instrument, but it was very interesting. And with Gary, really, I met Gary. I mean, I may have met him earlier, but I got to know him when I was working, when I was the director of Buddhist Peace Fellowship.
Yes.
He was one of the first members of Buddhist Peace Fellowship. And so we were in contact. This would be from the early 90s, just maybe from about the time that you came here. Mm-hmm. And so we had correspondence. He did stuff for Buddhist Peace Fellowship. And there was always a connection between him and, all of the early people of San Francisco Zen knew each other. So our zendo, the inside of our zendo, it's very beautiful natural wood, our zendo. And there are 4 posts about maybe 12 inches around that hold up the roof. And they go through the floor to the ground. And those posts were cut from trees on Gary Snyder's land. So there's a physical connection with Gary.
Yeah.
And then I also studied, for a time, he was a student of one of my other teachers, Robert Aitkenroshi. And so there have been a lot of connections over the years.
You mentioned that you came from a Jewish family, and I can also see you have done a lot in the area of interfaith. So please tell us what you think of other religions.
Well, I feel like there are many, you could say there are many paths up a mountain, or maybe there's many paths to the top of a mountain range. I don't think necessarily there's one mountain. There's different, there are different religious practices, different traditions that have their own shape and their own contour. And there are different challenging paths for getting to the top of that or getting deeply into it. So I tend to look for what I feel to be a universal expression of connection in religious traditions. And the interfaith work has, of course, been with people who are also open and wish to work with people in other traditions. And that is wonderful. And often there are real doctrinal aspects that block our coming to know each other or coming to understand each other.
Yes.
So I won't say that it's always easy, because, in their heart of hearts, almost every religion thinks that it's the best.
Yes. So it's not easy. And
So it's often not easy.
right.
But often the fact is that the people who come to be involved in interfaith activity are people who are capable of appreciating the others who come.
Yes.
So that's largely been my experience, but sometimes it takes a long time. I feel like for about 7 or 8 years, I was involved in a Zen Catholic dialogue, and it took us about 3 or 4 years to surface the fact that the Catholics were in a very difficult bind. They felt that they were under some internal pressure to, in a sense, to convert us.
Yes.
But but we never talked about that.
Yes.
And it took a long time to come out, and it wasn't until that came out and that they could set that aside that we could really establish a firm basis of trust.
Yes. I live in the South, where Christianity is very strong. So many Chinese immigrants feel compelled to be converted into Christianity in order to fit in America. Also,
Right.
They want to be lonely. And they tell me, oh, God bless America. So you have to believe in God if you want to become American.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to say. I just think they feel the pressure to blend in, and then they have to convert their religion. So what do you think of this pressure?
Well, I think the pressure, to some extent, the pressure is internal,
Mm-hmm.
and but to some extent, there really is an external pressure, and it's very hard, especially if you feel insecure in your standing in a community. You want to do what you can to fit in, but there are also places. I mean, I think about, in California, there are really large communities, large Chinese communities that have, they have their whole worlds that are quite separate, and that's another approach. But I know that in places in this country, if you're not Christian, people don't know how to think about you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I never grew up any place like that.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on the East Coast around New York, and
Mm-hmm.
then I lived out here. And on those edges of the country, that's not the case. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people of every religious background.
Yes.
In certain places, it's more homogeneous.
Yes. Yes. So there's some prejudice against Buddhism. I can give you some examples. Some
Sure.
people tell me Buddhism love wealthy people and they think the handicapped or the poor people are suffering because what they have done in their previous lives. And some say Buddhism is so pessimistic. It's all about emptiness. And there's one Christian told me, your Buddha is dead and he was a prophet. Our God is the real and only God. So what do you say to these people who hold such views?
Well, right. So those are two kind of separate thoughts. I mean, one is I don't think that Buddhism loves wealthy people is that's not true. You
Not
know,
true at all. Yeah.
that's just not true. I mean, the Buddha, if you look at the teachings and if you look at the record, the early writings, the Buddha welcomed everyone
Mm-hmm.
into his community, uh, and uh, and the Buddha had to. Uh, he constantly was advising his monks to go to every door to collect alms, and not to distinguish among people according to their wealth. So I don't, that's not true to me. I think that the there's a problem with the way people understand karma, and I can understand why people think. Often the way it's described is somewhat fatalistic, and that's true even in. I mean, you'll find that a lot in some of the Asian cultures. To me, that's a that's an incorrect way of understanding the Buddha's teachings, and it kind of reflects the way other religious history and other religious traditions have penetrated or have repenetrated back into Buddhism, so that karma begins to look like fate. If you are stutter or if you have bad health, then it's because of something that you did in a past life, and that's to me that is not a helpful or an accurate way of really interpreting what's going on. And the opportunity to me of Buddhism and of Buddhist karma is, if you are living with a difficult circumstance, how you are living determines how your life is going to go. In other words, and I remember talking to a young man at Stanford who stuttered, and it was very interesting. He wanted to know, why did he stutter? What had he done in a past life that caused him to stutter? You know, and I said, I don't think that's a useful question because you will never know. But you know, let's just notice we are standing here at Stanford University. You may have a speech difficulty, but you also have had the opportunity to study at one of the great universities of the world. And the question is, what are you going to do with your life? That's the question, not where did your disability come from.
Yes.
And so that's what I would say in that case. The other issues really get into matters of doctrine or theology. To say your Buddha is dead, it's ridiculous, because really the teaching is that Buddha nature, we all are constantly bringing forth, we embody Buddha nature. So there's other teachings that say you yourself are the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
So the Buddha's not dead, you're alive.
Yes.
Uh, and but that's the kind of thing you get into arguments about, right? If people are going to stick to their understanding, but that's the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there also are many teachings in which the Buddha is alive, and there have been very active Buddhist Christian dialogue for 50 years.
Yes.
And what they come to is realizing that the idea of God or the idea of Allah and the idea of Buddha, in many ways, they're not so separate.
Yes.
So I think the important thing to do in these circumstances is not to argue about belief systems, but to talk about how do you and I, if we're in different religious traditions, how do we relate to people?
Yes.
How do we take care of our world?
Yes.
And if we're doing, I think if our values are good, then there's not such a difference in how we're doing that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I moved back to China for 10 years, and when I came back, I found America as a society is more polarizing and dividing. What's the root cause of such problems?
Well, Buddhists would say greed, hatred, and delusion.
Yes, 贪嗔痴.
And what I would say also is a part of the delusion has very strong roots in the false principles of individualism. And I would say that the delusion is also very much related to, and this is interesting to say to somebody from China, it's related to the way the capitalist system works.
Mm-hmm.
What the capitalist system wants to do is to turn everyone into an individual consuming unit, and to sell people on the belief that if you buy certain things, you're going to be happy.
Yes.
And the strange thing about individualism is, it's preaching that everybody has individual rights, has individual desires and appetites. But really, in a mass society like this, then what they're doing is they're selling everybody the same stuff. Everybody should have the same running shoes or the same toothpaste or the same car. So in the name of individualism, they're organizing us to act as robots.
Yes. Yes.
So that's some of what I see is causing the division. The other aspect of it is, they're very deep aspects. There's a lot of fear, and we have, in many ways, we're just beginning to develop a common understanding of how deeply our society is structured on having groups and communities and classes that are oppressed and exploited and dominated, and have historically been so.
So there's one question I really try to understand: self-hatred. Why do people develop self-hatred, in your opinion? What's the cure for this?
Well, it's interesting because certainly in the United States, there's a lot of people who are experienced. I think that I hesitate to generalize about
Yes.
this. I think, but the self-hatred that one experiences in the West,
Yes.
that is based on guilt.
Yes.
And I think maybe that the self-hatred that one experiences particularly in East Asian communities, is perhaps based on shame.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
They're not exactly the same thing.
Similar. Shame is big in Japan, and people commit suicide to defend their honor. And
Right.
The Chinese community is the same thing. A sense of shame and a sense of loss of faith.
Right. So I think that one of the things that's different is that those cultures, Japan, China, and some other Asian cultures, are much more, the basis of the society is much more a collective social reality.
Yes.
Whereas here, with these principles of individualism, it's more internalized.
Yes.
It's what is suffering is more about guilt. It's about I as an individual am not adequate to this situation or something like that.
Yes. This is a very good explanation. I'm very satisfied with that. That has explained.
I think there's something broad about those dynamics that are worth looking at.
It's very valid point. Yeah.
For people in this country who are convert Buddhists, who have converted to it, they converted because there was something there, something often that was very far outside the culture that they grew up in, but there was something there that just felt right. And so I think it's a parallel process between what one might experience in music and what might experience in religious practice.
Yes. Thank you, Master Hosen.
Thank you. I will send you a couple of songs, okay?
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to send you, one of the songs I'm going to send you is a Bob Dylan song.
Yes. That would be great.